Hello, book lovers, and welcome to Book Talk Radio Club. My name is Claire Harris, and today I'm talking to Steven Webb. Stephen is the author of Midnight in Ndola, which recently reached #1 on the new releases list. Midnight in Ndola is a story of a plane crash that killed arguably the second most important man in the world, UN Secretary General, Dag Hammarskjöld. This sparked off an investigation that has lasted 60 years and one of the biggest whodunit mysteries in history. This book is an alternative to already published theories and shows how the current train of thought does not coincide with known evidence. Coincidence is not fact, which is what everyone so far has based their assumptions on. Let's find out more. Hello, Stephen. Thank you for coming to talk to me on Book Talk Radio Club.
Hi, Claire. Hi, listeners.
Midnight in Ndola. Why this particular whodunit? What drew you to writing about it?
Well, I was looking for another topic. I'd finished the Helderberg conspiracy, and I was looking for something else to write about. And I was actually watching a program, the One Night Air Crash Investigations, which I quite enjoy. And I'd actually looked at this topic about the Ndola crash probably about a year or so before I actually started writing it. And then I discarded it because I thought, well, 60 years old, who wants to hear about a 60-year-old plane crash, especially if there was nothing to it?
Right.
Which, of course, at the time, I didn't really know anything about it.
Yeah.
But I was watching, this was probably about a year later, I was watching the air crash investigation show the one night, and the narrator came out and he said that a 2013 investigation had come out with some startling new evidence. And I thought, well, startling new evidence of what? That sort of poked me up a little bit. And he went on and he carried on, and Sven Hammerberg, who we'll come back to shortly, actually the actor who played him, went on and mentioned something about high ground west of the airfield. And they went on and they said as the pilot banked around to come back towards the airfield, they lost sight of the runway lights and they crashed into the hill. And for a couple of seconds I missed it, and I carried on watching the program, and it suddenly dawned on me, and I went back and I listened to it again, and then I carried on watching the program, and I paid a little bit more attention this time round than what I had done in the beginning. And as the program wore on, I thought, well, hang on, there might be something here after all. Because what he had said there was actually incorrect. Because there are no hills around the airfield or on the approach path to Ndola airfield. And I know that for a fact because I lived and worked in Zambia in literally the same area for 14 years.
So tell me, I'm going to interrupt you, Stephen. So what happened in 1961 in Ndola? And you just said it's in Zambia, so you don't need to tell me where it is. But so what actually happened then?
Well, I don't know if people really know much about the Congo history, but what had happened is that Congo had just received had just gained their independence. But the province of Katanga had tried to cede away from the Congo itself, and I presume you'd call him the self-proclaimed leader of Katanga, Moise Chombi, wanted to break away, and his province was mineral rich. There was mining companies in there, and of course Patrice Lubamba asked the United Nations to step in and help. So what had happened is that Dag Hammarskjöld was now going to meet Moise Chombi in Ndola to try and sort this issue out, get him back to the table and get him back into the Congolese fold. And just before his plane landed, of course, it crashed into the forest just west of the airfield.
The plane.
And
Sorry, please carry on.
yeah,
Carry on.
no, carry on.
The plane crash killed arguably the second most important man in the world, UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld. First of all, what is the role of the UN Secretary General?
Okay, well, according to their own website, and I actually looked this up because I actually wasn't too sure what his role was, to be quite honest. But he's basically the CEO, if you call it, of the United Nations. But a better example than that is what they actually have on their own website, which actually states, and I'll quote it, is that he is equal part diplomat and advocate, civil servant and CEO. The Secretary General is a symbol of the United Nations ideals and a spokesperson for the interests of the world's peoples, in particular the poor and vulnerable among them. So, and you know, as people, well, some people might know, some people won't. I mean, this is a 60-year-old accent, but he was very anti-colonialism. He was all for Africa being basically for the African, looking after themselves.
Right. So what kind of man was he? Then he was obviously a people man. So what else? What else can you tell me about him?
Well, he was, and I think Sven Hammerberg in his foreword explains it very well. He was a very well-educated man, obviously, and apparently his first few weeks as Secretary General, he spent walking around the United Nations offices, shaking hands with every single employee that worked there. It's something that you do not find anywhere anymore. And I think that alone gives you some sort of idea of what type of person he was.
Absolutely.
He looked after his staff. For all intents and purposes, he was a very nice, caring gentleman. He looked after his staff.
This happened 60 years ago now. Why has it taken this long to come to a conclusion that it was foul play, not an accident?
Well, they haven't come to a conclusion.
Oh, they still haven't.
They're still going on about it, and this is one of the issues at hand at the moment. That although there's no evidence linking the air crash to foul play, for some reason they are still looking at factors that could lead the crash to external factors. And while they're doing that, they're ignoring, to me, what is the more obvious factors, and that is pilot error. And right at the very beginning in 1962, before these investigations took place, the United Nations turned around and told one of the investigating bodies that they are not to come to a conclusion of pilot error before they have considered every other aspect, which is normal. I mean, that is what any sort of investigation would do anyway.
Yeah.
But that just tells me that if they're going to make that sort of statement, that somebody somewhere along the line has already thought of this. That somewhere someone knows something that would put light or put something into light that would indicate pilot error could be an issue. And as far as I'm concerned, it certainly is. But it's a multiple or a multitude of issues. It's not just simply pilot error. There are other factors involved that result in pilot error. I mean, the final crash verdict was a controlled flight into terrain. But there's factors involved with that causes a controlled flight into terrain. It's not simply a pilot flying the aeroplane into the ground.
No, absolutely. So you actually disagree with the conclusion of foul play?
Oh, absolutely. There's no evidence at all that foul play took part. I mean, there are so many theories. there's theories that the plane was hijacked. There's no evidence of that. There's theory that the plane was shot down. There's no evidence of that. There's a theory that it was blown up. There's no evidence of that. And a lot of these things have been tested. You know, they did explosive residue tests on the remains of the aircraft. Nothing was ever found. And no bullet holes. And although there's a little controversy regarding the amount of bullets and apparently bullets that were found in bodies, these were easily explained because not one of the bullets found within the bodies ever passed through the barrel of a gun. And that is very easily explained by the intensity of the fire from the crash itself. So there's that, you know, they have a lot of things, but the United Nations has literally excluded all of these things themselves, yet are still looking for a reason to call this anything other than an accident.
I like the quote from Stuart Stafford at the beginning of the book. Think logically and you have a chance to solve a problem. Reacting emotionally prolongs and worsens your dilemma, which is totally true. Tell me why you included that, please.
Well, because I think that's quite simply what's going on at the moment. They are not thinking rationally. They are not looking at all of the evidence as it is. And like I've said, they are looking. There's a thing in accident investigations that if the evidence does not fit the theory, then the theory has to change. And what is happening here is that they're not changing the theory. They're trying to make the evidence fit their own theories.
Right.
And it's not working. But for some reason, they are not changing the theory. They are stuck on this idea that his plane was shot down, or there was some sort of foul play that went on that resulted in the death of this man and his 15 colleagues on that aircraft. And it's not working.
You have a foreword written by Sven Hammerberg, who you mentioned before, who says of your book, Steven Webb shows a clear insight into the realities around the crash, and he succeeds with a piece of art in both summarising and analysing the enormous factual basis that exists regarding the crash. So who is Sven Hammerberg?
Okay, Sven Hammerberg is a air crash investigator in Sweden, and he is a former fighter pilot.
Okay.
Now, to get to how he became involved, I need to go back to about 2011, and the Dr. Susan Williams, if I remember correctly, yes, Dr. Susan Williams wrote a book called Who Killed Dag Hammarskjöld? And on the basis of her book, United Nations created the Hammarskjöld Commission to investigate again this accident. And Sven Hammerberg was employed or tasked as the air crash investigator.
All right. Now let's talk a little bit about you, Steven Webb, author and editor. You were born in England in 1961 and moved to South Africa with your parents in 1971. You spent many years working in countries like Liberia, Sudan, Mozambique, Botswana, Egypt and Zambia, working as a remote site medic and project leader in the oil and gas industry, the mining industry and various peacekeeping missions. A few years ago you developed an interest in editing when a friend asked you to help a colleague who had authored a book. This book became an Amazon bestseller. Since then you've edited several other works. One can view these on your website. So an editor as well as an author, which came first?
Chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
Author.
Uh-huh.
I wrote my first book in 2008, and I can't remember when I edited that first book for the years ago.
Oh, right.
So yeah, I started writing first.
Do you specialise in one particular genre of books for editing, or are you happy to edit different genres? I mean, what is your website address so people can take a look?
Well, I started off doing non-fiction, but just lately I've branched out a little bit because the publisher who I do some editing for asked me to edit a couple of poetry books.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, well, this could be a bit of a challenge, especially considering I wasn't very good at poetry at school. And I thought, well, let's have a go at it. And it seemed to turn out all right because the second poetry book I edited, or co-edited, has just become a bestseller on Amazon as well. So,
Oh, brilliant.
I'm quite happy to test the waters with different genres. I do enjoy non-fiction because it gives me an opportunity to learn different things and learn things about people. But no, I wouldn't say I would stick with one thing now that I've had a taste of different things.
And what's your website address?
Oh, it's what is it? It's Steven Webb editing.com. So it's StevenWebbEditing.com.
You've written 4 books. Did you edit them yourself or hire an editor? I can't imagine it being easy editing your own writing.
No, I generally don't edit my own stuff. I am busy at the moment re-editing my first 2 books because they were never put out into a digital format.
Right.
And I would really like to have seen them in a digital form, but for whatever reason, the publishers never got around to it, didn't do it, whatever their story was, I have no idea. But I would like to see that happen. So I'm re-editing the first 2, which I will put out onto Amazon sometime towards the end of this year, maybe even beginning of next year. But generally, I don't edit my own work unless I'm on a time constraint. I'll have somebody else edit it for me.
Right.
And which I have access to, obviously working for or along with GMGA publishers. It's like you say, it isn't easy editing your own work because, well, it's probably a bit of 6 of one and half dozen of the other, because I think you become more super critical if you're editing your own work, and you'll find mistakes literally in every sentence that maybe another editor wouldn't. But it's also just as easy to miss them and think, okay, but I like that sentence the way it is, so I'm just going to leave it. And somebody else might read it and think that it doesn't make much sense, but it did to me.
Yeah,
so,
I can see that.
But no, in general, no, I don't usually edit my own stuff.
As an editor then, what do you consider the most important piece of advice you can give to authors?
Have your work edited.
That's simple.
Yeah, look, it's imperative that you have it edited. I know, being an editor as well, and I make a couple of bob out of editing people's books, but if you put out a book that has not been edited, you are not going to pick up the errors, the spelling mistakes, the grammar mistakes, the syntax errors. There are a million things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
And as much as we all like to think that we are English speakers, we understand the language, we know where to put the commas, the hyphens, you name it, we actually don't. We put them in the wrong places, we leave them out. And if you're going to do that, you could get your first book out. That's not a problem, because these days a lot of people doing self-publishing because the bigger publishers don't want to look at us, and they are missing out on lots of fantastic work.
Yep.
The problem is, though, is if you do not have your work edited, you can put your book out onto Amazon, have it published, people will buy it, first time.
Yeah.
If you put out another book and you haven't had it edited, people remember that that last book I bought of his or hers, it was all over the place. There were no commas. The sentences ran into each other. That sentences there didn't make sense, and people remember that, and they'll think, well, I'm not going to waste money on that one again.
Absolutely.
It is absolutely vital that you have your work edited, and I know that editors out there have or do charge an absolute fortune sometimes, because they go according to the guidelines given by the editing societies and whatever you have. But there are some good editors out there that will do it for you at a reasonable rate without taking your shirt off your back.
Exactly.
But that's important. That's important. I can't stress that one enough.
You're already receiving good reviews for Midnight in Ndola, including Steve is an excellent author who doesn't skint on his research. His new book, Midnight in Ndola, is very well written, a great read, and very easy to follow his narrative. The book puts an end to conspiracy theories and is fact-based. Have a read, you will not be disappointed. Great review. So where can Book Talk Radio Club listeners purchase Midnight in Ndola?
It's on all the Amazon bases at the moment, .com, UK, Australia, and all the others. It's not on any of the others like, was it Smashwords, Kobo, anything like that at the moment, because it's on Kindle Unlimited.
Right.
So there's a time limit, I think, of 90 days or something.
That's
to that
it,
effect.
yeah.
So at the moment, it's only available through Amazon.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Stephen. Please come back on Book Talk Radio Club again. I'd love to chat with you and hear more. In the meantime, good luck for the future, and thank you, everyone, for listening to Book Talk Radio Club. Lovely to speak to you, Stephen.
Thanks very much, Claire.
Okay, bye now.